1987, when Ronald Reagan gave that speech in Berlin, in front of the Berlin Wall, he was immediately referring to the Berlin Wall, but he's referring to a much longer wall that spanned 4,300 miles across between Eastern Europe and Western Europe, as you see it delineated on the map. The pinkish red is the Soviet Union and the countries controlled by the Soviet Union. The blue is Western Europe. And between those two blocks was a wall made of concrete, barbed wire. It had landmines on the eastern side. There were guards posted all along that wall of wire and concrete because the Soviet Union, after World War II, built that wall to keep anybody from leaving the Soviet bloc and to virtually keep anybody else from coming in, with some exceptions, but especially no missionaries, because the Soviet Union was an atheistic empire that did a very good job of indoctrinating people from the time they were children that there is no God. I witnessed that firsthand when I was in Eastern Europe, that generation was convinced that there was no God because of the Soviet influence. So no missionaries were allowed into the land. There was no freedom of religion. But that decree of the Soviet Union didn't stop these two courageous people sitting up here with me today. They knew that the people of Eastern Europe needed to hear the saving message of Jesus. They needed to be taught the Word of God to grow as disciples. And so Ed and Coralie Murray prayed and did all they could, and they did go into Eastern Europe, and they have quite a story to tell. Ed and Coralie are heroes in my eyes, but I want to tell you they're heroes in the eyes of many, many people in Eastern Europe today. And I believe that they're heroes in the eyes of God. You're going to hear some of their story that also includes some things about Cypress Valley Bible Church, because you're going to learn this morning how Ed and Coralie, God used them in the strangest and amazing way to help in the founding of Cypress Valley Bible Church 48, almost 49 years ago, and how they were used of God to open a door for our church to be so heavily involved in missionary work in Eastern Europe, especially the small country of Moldova. So, Ed and Coralie Murray, it's good to have you back in Marshall, Texas at Cypress Valley Bible Church. You were here in 2017, so it's been 6 years since you've been here, but welcome back.
Thank you. Good to be back.
Thank you very much. It is wonderful to be back with you. And, you know, when we were here in 2017, you still had wooden pews. That was about to change, but this is a wonderful auditorium you have now. And it's great to see how God has blessed this group. I'll tell you a little bit about it. But first of all, I want to make a qualifier on Bob's statement about heroes. Yeah. We're just people with dirty feet like you all. And the Lord is the one who graciously provides and cleanses and transforms. And he's the one who gave us a vision, and he's the one we follow. Sometimes you follow the Lord Jesus. You don't know where you're going. You just know that he's in charge, and he knows where he's going, so you follow him.
I've often said we were young, idealistic, and naive. Yeah. And all of those turned out to be positive. So, yeah.
If you weren't young, idealistic, and naive, you probably wouldn't have gone.
That's right.
True. Yeah.
Yeah. But let me tell you a little bit about how this started. We went to Dallas Seminary from 1969 to 1973. And I had become a Christian at the University of Nebraska, or Northwestern University, as a freshman there. And the Lord had very quickly thereafter made it clear to me that this is how I wanted to spend my life. sharing the gospel with people wherever. And we went to Dallas Seminary, and in the course of that time, we decided that we wanted to do something to reach out to people, to be in a situation that was more fresh or pioneer. And we found a little card on the board at Dallas Seminary that said there was a group of people in Midlothian, Texas, who were interested in doing Bible study and possibly, maybe, starting a church. And I didn't know where Midlothian was. I had no idea where we were going, except I got a map out and I realized we're traveling south on 67. And we went down and met a group of people there that we began studying with in 1972. And we walked through the Bible with them, and we preached the gospel to them and shared the good news of Jesus Christ with them. And the next picture you'll see here was taken in July of 1973.
A word to you young people. If you think you're so cool and hip the way you're dressed, you'll laugh hard at your pictures down the road.
So this is the day, July 15th, when Midlothian Bible Church was born, officially, legally. That first day, they sent us out. They commissioned us to the mission field. And God had led in very interesting ways to call Dave and Mary Wurtson to come and pastor that church. And they were there for 40 years and saw the church grow and become a strong force of the gospel in Midlothian and around the world. Well, there was a couple in that church. You can show the next picture. Dale and Barbara Fouché. And they loved what we were doing. Fresh, new, young, small. And they moved to Marshall. And this is a picture in their front door here in Marshall when we came in 1977. They had come, and they said, well, let's do something like this here. So they went back to Dave Wurtson, who was their pastor from Midlothian, and said, who could come help us? And Dave and Bob were in seminary in the same class together. And Dave said, well, maybe Bob would be interested. So that's how Bob and Sherry ended up coming to Marshall and starting the Bible study that became Cypress Valley Bible Church. This next picture, we came then in 1977.
Who are those? Who are those people?
I don't know. I don't know where I got that picture, but we.
I think the cute little girl does a great children's ministry, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that's right. Who would have thought, you know? But we came back in 1977 from our first 4 years in Europe, and we had gone together with 5 other couples, and we had we were 5 together, ended up in Vienna, and that's where we started learning German and praying, God, how will you find ways for us to go through this curtain, to move into Eastern Europe, to begin to find people who are interested in the gospel and form cell groups and situations where people can hear the gospel in the communist world, which was infiltrated with incredible propaganda about the virtues of socialism and the fact that there is no God. And yet we knew from the scriptures that God had his people everywhere. Make disciples of all nations. And so this, we came to Marshall in 1977, presented our ministry, and it was just a weekend. It was our 10th anniversary. My wife spent her 10th anniversary feeding kids spaghetti in the kitchen of Bob and Sherry at that time.
I had the most kids of the group.
And Bob called me then after we had left a couple of days later. He says, you know, the elders have talked and we want to support your ministry. So that's how it started in 1977. And you have been faithful beyond measure, and we'll talk about that later, but every month to support us personally. But God has opened doors for you to be involved in many people's lives in missions, not only in Europe, Moldova, but around the world. And God just has his amazing ways of leading. These verses that you see in front of you are from Colossians, and they have guided our lives through the years and give us a sense of mission and purpose. Paul writes and he says, so we will tell others about Christ. Very simple. We will tell others about Christ, warning everyone and teaching everyone with all wisdom that God has given to us. We want to present people to God perfect or mature in their relationship with Christ. That's why we work and struggle so hard. And it is sometimes it's hard work. It's just a struggle. But we depend on Christ's mighty power working in us. A beautiful description of what God has called us to work and to struggle and to focus on his good work that he wants to do. And yet he comes alongside of us and energizes us and gives us the power that we need. And so that's what we took with us to Europe. This picture that you'll now see is the first team meeting we had in 1975. The 5 couples are there from Dallas Seminary.
And you'll notice there's more children than there are adults.
Yeah, and we had added a couple of more couples, and we were ready, but we had no idea where we were going or how to do this. We lived in Vienna, all of us. We prayed. We met together regularly for prayer. God, open the gates, open the doors, help us to find the holes in the Iron Curtain. And he began to do that. And there's some amazing things we could talk about. One little story, my wife and I led the very first Polish project in 1976, just 2 years later, after we had moved to Vienna.
The twins were a year and a half. And we went in for 2 weeks. We had a rotating plan of another couple to come in and relieve us, and something happened in Vienna and they couldn't come, so they messaged us, could we stay longer? And we were having a ball. We're seeing God do things, and it was just exciting. And I said, I'd love to stay, but I've got 3 in diapers and I am running out. Pampers had not yet been invented over there. And so anyway, somebody smuggled in diapers for us, and we stayed and had a wonderful time. And it wasn't until years later I ran into the missionary who helped smuggle those in.
How did you get, I just got through saying there was barbed wire, landmines, soldiers with guns. They said no missionaries can come.
Yeah.
Now, how did you, where,
Well,
can you explain that? How did you get in? And weren't you scared? I would have been scared. Weren't you scared?
I was scared, often scared, petrified sometimes. He somehow was never scared. Our team leader says he always had butterflies in his stomach. So, that's where God uses all of our different personalities.
It's not quite right that I was never scared. I had my moments. But it was an adventure. Now, how did we do it?
One thing that helped getting across that one border was we had a stinky diaper, and the guard decided he didn't want to check our card out too closely. Never thought of it as a strategy.
Never know what God's going to use next.
But how do you do this? You certainly don't put missionary on your application for visa, but you put tourist. And it's interesting that the communists were actually very good capitalists because they realized they could make money on tourism. And so you'd put down tourist, and they would tell you where to stay, and they would tell you how much it would cost to be there. And it was a very expensive endeavor to go to places that were often very low quality. But that's the practical way of how we got in, usually. We went in as tourists, and then we did our work in the country. Sometimes very carefully. We were followed in those early days, and
Followed
by security services.
Security.
Yeah.
They were following you to.
Yeah,
Okay.
and we were aware.
We have a, what do you call it in English?
Well, we have a file.
A file.
On file with the East German government, and there's a little bit of a sidebar, but our colleague, one of the colleagues we traveled with often, you can request your file. The West German or the German government has released these files now, and you can request them. And he requested his file, and just a couple of years ago, or well, it was before COVID, we got together with them in East Germany to celebrate what God had done. And he had requested his file. There were 100 pages. The government sent him 100 pages of material that they had on file about us and what we were doing, with pictures. They had pictures.
So you were on file.
We were on file.
Whoa.
I haven't requested mine yet. I still have the application, but yeah, we were not. We didn't know.
The thing is, the conclusion they came to is that we were a group of young Americans, and we were not dangerous. We're just meeting with people and having coffee. And who knew that you could have home churches and read the Bible together, and God would be at work, and you don't have to build a building and do all that stuff.
So it was a very interesting period. We learned German, and as we began to think about traveling into East Germany more specifically, we realized, okay, I think our German's good enough that we could try something. And we had been given some contacts from a Jewish woman who had come to Christ in Jerusalem. And she lived in Berlin, and she traveled to East Germany regularly. And she had developed contacts there with Christians. And she said, I'd like you. She was getting old and wanted to stop her travels. And she said, I'd like to have you guys take over some of my contacts. So we made that first trip, 1976. And we came to the border, my friend and I. And we had a few things that we'd put in the glove compartment. And we probably should have hidden them better. There were some names, some materials. Well, we got to the border, and there's towers and machine guns and barbed wire, and it's very intimidating to drive up to one of these borders. And you don't know what's going to happen. They come out, and they called my colleague into the office. Please bring your luggage with you. So he goes in, and they rifle through everything he had. And then a man came out without my colleague. He's still in the building. And he comes out, and he goes directly to the glove compartment. And my colleague had not said anything about this, so I don't know how this happened, but he went immediately there, pulled out the name, this list of names, and some of the materials that we had there. He rifled through them, looked at them, he says, do you know these people? Well, the fortunate thing was we didn't. We hadn't met them yet. Of course, the question is, what are you doing with this? He didn't ask that question. He said, do you know them? I said, no, I don't know them. And he looked some more at the materials. He put these things back in my hand. I put them in the glove compartment. He walked away. And we assumed that was it. They would put our names on the record. These people are never to be allowed back in this country. Well, we traveled 15 more years, 3 or 4 times a year into East Germany after that incident. We did become a little more careful about what we did with our information. But we built up a work. We had people, we had youth groups that were meeting with us to be trained in how to share the gospel. We started Bible teaching. Every summer we would go in and do Bible courses. They were hungry. They were hungry people. And they were eager to learn. And they were also eager to learn to share their faith in a context that we didn't understand. We couldn't tell them how to do it. How do you share faith with your atheistic neighbor who will probably report you? And you will go on record as being a sympathizer with the West, which in some cases could mean jail. But they were willing to do that. And that's how the work began, very, very, very slowly.
Why don't you tell in '86 how we started the leadership?
Well, yeah, let me show you this next picture here. This is our family, 1985. We had the 4 children when we went to Vienna. The first picture you saw was 2 children. Then we had twins in England. And then we went to Vienna with 4 kids. We decided we were done, got a dog. Isn't that what you do? You're done with your kids, you get a dog. Well, we got a dog, and then we got pregnant. So we added a 5th one on, and this was our family then as we were in 1985. And I want to show you a couple of pictures, 1981. 1985, here's a picture of the Berlin Wall. This is what Reagan was talking about and tearing down. You see how formidable this wall is. 13 feet high, It's made of concrete, and it's covered with barbed wire at the top. Now, behind this wall, you'll see a second wall. It's a white wall, clear in the background. And between that white wall and the front wall, you see there's about 50 yards of sand, raked sand with mines and landmines and tank barriers. And then the windows on the building have been blocked, have been bricked up, because when the wall began to be built, people would go to those windows and jump out the window just to get over to the west. So this is a no man's land. The tower you see there with men with guns ready, and I should know this figure, but there were many people who died at this border trying to get out. So it wasn't an easy place to get into, and you certainly couldn't get out of it. And so here's a picture of our family on the west side of the wall, 1985.
The kids are growing, understanding more and more. They're coming with very good questions, but as you've often probably experienced, as you try to explain some things to your kids, you realize how ridiculous it is. It makes no sense. And that was the conclusion they came to, and it's like, Mommy, this isn't right. Why is this? Mommy, this isn't right. And Mommy, of course, is supposed to fix everything, so Mommy, do something. And so in my desperation, I prayed, cried out to the Lord, and in 1989, when the wall came down, they came home from school one day and said that they'd heard the wall in Berlin had come down. And I realized I had not prayed with great faith, but like I say, with desperation. And so here I was hearing this news, and I said, let's don't get excited. Let's turn on the TV and see what's happening in the world. So, I cried out to God. He did answer, like we sang. He is a God who hears. And you will hear many theories about how the wall came down and what brought it down. I think God brought it down in his perfect timing.
In 1986, we had started a training program. We saw a group of young people who were willing and eager to begin a organized work of evangelism in East Germany. And we picked out about 35 people and began training them. We could get together 3 times a year, work with them. And out of this group, we saw people rising up and say, yes, God is calling me. I want to be involved full-time to share the gospel with my countrymen. And so this went on for 3 years. 1989, we're coming to the end of our training course, and we have 14 people who have said, yes, God is calling me, leading me to help begin the Matthew work, we called it, based on Matthew 28, the Great Commission. And they were going to set up a structure, they were going to raise support, they were going to do all they needed to do to have a work of Christ, evangelism, behind the Iron Curtain in East Germany. Amazing faith. And we couldn't tell them how to do that. They had to do it themselves. And that was in October of 1989. We had these 14 people ready to start this ministry. We brought our training course to an end, gave them certificates, and the day we gave them their certificates, in October of '89, Honecker, the secretary of the Communist Party in East Germany, was removed from power. And a month later, November 9th, 1989, the wall comes down. And there are Germans who have come out with their hammers and their picks and to destroy this wall. And there are enough people in this room who remember those scenes. And all of a sudden, these people were free. They were free. They were ready to begin their work with Christ. And they could do it freely. We could organize. We could raise support. And we trained them. And in January of 1990, they began the work of Campus Crusade for Christ in East Germany. And they stepped into an incredible spiritual vacuum after communism that had taught them for years, there is no God. There is no God. Communism is all things. It will provide all things for you. And all of a sudden, it was gone. It was done. And they said, well, what purpose does life have now? And so in that vacuum, all across Eastern Europe, we were able to go in with the Jesus film and other tools to bring the gospel to people that had never, ever had a chance to hear the good news.
Yeah, I want to comment. I've been to Moldova 19 times, and most of the other Eastern European countries, thanks to your invitation, which we'll talk about. But I just want to underscore how effective the Soviet Union was in indoctrinating people. I saw it firsthand because, of course, the people that we worked with were mostly younger. But all of them, we would try to talk to every one of them while we were there for lunch or dinner, breakfast, and just ask them about their family. Tell me about your parents. My parents are atheists. My parents are atheists. My parents are atheists. My parents are atheists. I'm just like,
My parents are members of the Communist Party.
whoa. I saw it firsthand, and I hate the Soviet Union for that. I just hate it that they were so good at literally indoctrinating people to believe that there is no God. It's the younger generation that was open to new truth, which you planted the seeds. And I'm telling you, when the light was there before the curtain fell, but when the curtain fell, these groups that had been reached and trained, the light just started to shine brightly, especially among the younger generation, who in turn then tried to reach their parents, and many of them
They
have reached their parents.
Yes.
But it's a true darkness.
Yeah.
I witnessed it even after the fall, to hear them talk about their parents. It was true spiritual darkness in Eastern Europe, and the light was shining before the fall. But when the Iron Curtain fell and these groups were able to have freedom, the light began to shine even more brightly, thanks to people like Ed and Coralie that God had used to plant those seeds.
And I've talked more about East Germany now, but there are 20 other countries in Eastern Europe. And the interesting thing is we found out relatively quickly that it was possible, strangely possible, for people from America to live in these countries. They could study there, they could do special study programs, they could do business there, they could teach there, they did sport work. We had one guy that was hired by the Krakow, Poland basketball team to come and play basketball for the police department in a communist country.
And we had single women that went in. One went in to teach swimming in what was then Czechoslovakia, and another woman went into Romania under a Fulbright scholarship to study the legends of Dracula. Fortunately,
In Transylvania.
In
Transylvania,
Transylvania.
that's where he comes from, supposedly.
Yeah, fortunately, she had been involved with Cru Campus Crusade in college, knew how to lead people to Christ and lead a Bible study and train others. And so, God was so creative in many ways that he threw open the doors and made it
So
possible.
while we were working in East Germany, what I've told you now, there were almost 200 other American staff workers who had made this commitment. And you think we're heroes. I mean, we look at some of those people and we say, what heroes who were willing to live in a communist country with their families for those many years, not knowing what the future would hold, and do evangelism and begin to do the groundwork so that when the wall came down, we had people in place all over the Soviet Union to begin the work of Campus Crusade for Christ there and the work of evangelism in this spiritual vacuum that was very much present. But that gave rise to the fact that Eastern Europeans wanted to join us, and they needed training. And so as the wall came down, we turned our attention to biblical training, helping our staff to get better foundations for the work that God had called them to do. And that's what we were doing in Eastern Europe for that decade of the 2000s, or 1900s. And
1990s.
1990 to 2000. And we were very encouraged with that work. Such hungry people. And it was also a point at which we thought, how can we engage our friends and supporters from America? And I thought, well, Bob loves to teach. And so how can we get him over here to teach? So I began to set up appointments with not only Bob, but some other pastors and people like that who wanted to teach, to come over and experience firsthand life behind the Iron Curtain, post-Iron Curtain, and help us with our work of teaching people the gospel and the foundations they needed. So where are we now? Yeah, Moldova. How do we get from there to Moldova? Little tiny country. Anybody know where Moldova is? You're probably more intelligent about Moldova
Than the average American.
than the average person who doesn't have a clue what it is. In 2000, we
It's
were
between,
approached.
it's between Ukraine and Romania.
That's right.
All right.
Yeah. And we had been asked in 2000 to consider leading this country. We'd already started the ministry in Austria, started the ministry in East Germany, and had done this pioneer kind of work in national leadership. So they came and said, Moldova needs help. Could you step in and give leadership to the work in Moldova, you and your wife? So we began in the year 2000. We had done some teaching there and loved the people, loved the country, and began with a group that you see in front of you now, next picture. A small group of people who were committed to Christ, needed help, needed direction, needed teaching, and we stepped in to begin leading that ministry in 2000. Well, we were teaching courses. I had scheduled to go back in 2001 to teach a course in Moldova, and I had an accident. I was playing volleyball, 55 years of age, and I didn't warm up, and I ripped open my knee.
And we were in Albania.
In
There's
Albania.
a story there.
Yeah. Had to be evacuated out, and you're standing next to a donkey, trying to talk with people on the evacuation team, what's going on. Very interesting experience. But anyway, I was in a cast for 2 months and in rehabilitation for another 2. And during that time is when I was scheduled to teach. Bob and Sherry had already come a couple of summers before and done some teaching for us. So they knew a little bit about the area, and they knew about our decision to take on Moldova. So I said, Bob, is there any way, they were coming, can you squeeze in Moldova to teach there for my staff, or our staff? And Bob, you can tell a little bit about the rest of the history.
Well, I squeezed it in for 19 more years. And going back, Lord willing, in January. So we're still squeezing in Moldova after 20 years, or 22 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Began a wonderful journey where not only did our staff fall in love with Bob and Sherry and vice versa, many of you have become involved in our ministry there, supporting these staff. The next picture, please, shows the ministry that we turned over in 2010. We grew from about 10 or 15 to over 70 staff. And these are many of the people that Cypress Valley Bible Church have begun to support and are still supporting. A wonderful journey of seeing God work in that country.
We have individual families from Cypress Valley that support individual families in that, on the staff. And
that was Sherry's brilliant idea.
Yeah, that was Sherry.
Saw when they were there, she saw, here's people got great, but Moldova is, I think, we taught them how to raise support, but their average monthly donation was $2. So it's like, we're not going to get very far here. And that's when they were there, she got this vision, came back and put up the adoption area on. So these people, and we desperately need prayer. Nothing happens. You can throw money around if you don't have. Appreciate each one of you that has gotten involved with any and all of our Moldovan staff, and for your faithful prayers. And what you hear, the stories you hear about, are the result of God at work.
Most encouraging in all Europe, with almost 1,000 full-time workers. They're all nationals. There are very few Americans left in this process.
The
Not
ones
that
that
God
are
is not
left are,
calling.
they're married to a national.
Yeah, not the calling to work in this area. Work is being carried. Some of these position tremendous ways to multiply steps that we took back in 19. The next picture I'll show you. Last assignment we just did, we were asked to give leadership to the country of Bulgaria. The country had already been in existence for about 20 years, but had run onto some hard ground. There was leadership conflict, there were difficulties in the structure of the ministry, and so we stepped in 2013 to help that situation. 2020 better shape than it was. The last assignment before we decided how long can we. We have 4 children now in the United States. 1 child is still in Austria where she grew up. Age-wise, we realized we're not getting younger, and it was time to come back to the United States. So we came back. Then of course COVID hit. That delayed our plan and made it very difficult to all the friends and people we had met through the almost 50 years of work, and we couldn't do any of that. We couldn't leave Hungary. Couldn't even in Austria. The borders were closed.
The last 2 Christmases over there, we did not have Christmas with our daughter and her family over there. That was really disappointing.
So we have relocated now in Manhattan, Kansas. We have not stopped doing the ministry. And the next slide will show you a little bit about what we're doing now. I'm involved with what's called the Global Alliance, or Global Academy for Transformational Leadership, which has taken the leaders of church movements that we have around the world, Eastern European staff need biblical. Now we have a group of people train them and to work with. We do a lot of that work on Zoom. It's amazing how the allowed us could not even dreamed of back in the 70s. But we do have face-to-face meetings every semester with a group of people that we're working with, 27 people I'm working with right now. And then each of those has not convey and what's in the heart is what drives ministry. And it's not theology. It's not having all the ducks in a row with what I know, but that my life reflects the person of Christ. We call it the Academy for Leadership. Lives who have been conformed or are being conformed to the image of Christ, who can lead and be a part of a worldwide movement that
continents.
There's people from all 5 continents in that group.
All right. And when they, every 6 months, it could be in the world.
In a country for 2 weeks where